Just read this article this morning from the LA Times from a year ago about loneliness. And it said that 67% of Gen Z, as they're often called, that's Z there for our British Canadian listeners. Um, Gen Z was like 67% loneliness, felt lonely. Um, Millennials was like 65, and Gen X was something like 60, and the boomers were like 44% felt lonely. That's kind of sad. Um, I, as a philosopher, I've never treated philosophically the concept of loneliness. Not sure how to do that exactly as a philosopher, but here's some thoughts on it. If you take it as an ontological question, what is loneliness? I'd have to say it's like a state of the soul or the mind, probably a state of the whole person. I don't uh, think that loneliness is purely an intellectual reality. Um, it's a feeling. So, as a feeling, it's probably related to our emotions. And then, of course, our bodies as well. So, let's just start with the Platonic tripartite descriptive psychology. And you can take it or leave it. I'm a semi Platonist, quasi Platonist about this. So, let's just look at it from this perspective. And then maybe we'll touch on a little bit of Aristotle, and then maybe move on to some Christian thinkers. But starting with Plato, right? You as a person, I as a person, human beings, we are souls and bodies, body soul composites, if you will. Plato doesn't exactly use that language, but there's different interpretations of how to think about Plato on the soul and body relation. But at least in the Republic, he thought that you as a person had three parts to you. You had an intellect, you had a will, and you had a body. And the will is that central part of you, which is also the seat of your emotions. And the intellect is the seat of reason, the mind, rational thought, the logistone, and then the rest of you is the alogistone, the non-logical part. And that non-logical part has those two divisions: the will, which is the seat of emotions and feelings, and the body, which is the seat of bodily desires, the thing that pays the bills, if you will, the thing that keeps reason going, gives it uh, the nutrients and the sustenance it needs to run. And that's Plato's descriptive psychology. And then, of course, the prescriptive psychology for Plato is that reason should rule in conjunction with and over the emotions in order to moderate the body's desires. And that leads to a just soul or a just person. So I suspect that on a Platonic view, that loneliness probably falls somewhere in that middle part of us. That if I'm lonely, it's because my emotions are not properly aligned to my rational faculties and my body. And so, if I think about the degenerate types of souls, I think probably loneliness as a defect in me, if I'm lonely and I'm feeling that that's affecting me negatively, it's probably because my reason is not taking my body and my emotions and properly ordering them in the right way. Now, this is where I think Aristotle comes in. Aristotle's discussion of friendship in the Nicomachean Ethics, I think, is going to be super important on this. And he thought that, rightly recognized, I think Plato recognizes this too, and so these two thinkers aren't opposed to each other, because in the Republic, an individual doesn't live in isolation. Even the philosophers outside the cave are contemplating the good, but they're doing this in conversation, at least as far as I can tell. In his understanding of that, it's the dialectic, that back and forth, that keeps us going in our vision of the good. But for Aristotle in the Polis, friendship is going to be central to it. So if I'm lonely, or if you're lonely, it's probably because of a lack of friendship. And friendship, of course, is not easy. It's for some people it comes very naturally, but for others of us, and maybe for philosophers in particular, it can be a little difficult. And probably it's exacerbated. The lack of friendship is exacerbated by um, the sort of isolation that comes from staring at a screen. There's a lot of irony in this with me doing that right now at the moment and you doing that while you're watching this video. So turn off the video and go make some friends. But I don't want to just end there. So the question then becomes, what is friendship? And I think this is where a few insights from Aristotle and from C.S. Lewis in his little book called The Four Loves will be quite helpful. Um, Friendship is a necessary condition, I think, for the expression of the virtues. And so if I want to be happy, according to Aristotle, I have to have rational activity with the expression of virtues in a complete life. And some of the virtues, like wittiness or generosity or courage, can only be expressed in community with others. So that's not just community of the polis or community with my superiors or my inferiors or my peers. By inferiors, I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean just people who are not the same as I am, who might be very young, and superiors may be people who are very different than I am and very old, and my peers are people that are roughly my same age, same life status or whatever. Um, so those things are important, but then to express the deeper virtues or express them well was going to require friendship. So one of the ways to think about friendship is to think about it in terms of other relationships that we have and other types of love, because friendship is a type of love, and love is going to be central to that emotive part of us. That's going to involve our will and our actions and our emotions, but those, of course, should be ruled by your intellect, according to Plato, and I think he's quite right about that. So Lewis, in his book, The Four Loves, distinguishes friendship, philia, like Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, Phil, or Philippa. These are word love is in those types of things. Friendship is distinguished between other types of love, particularly lover's love. I think this is the big contrast here. Um, Whereas eros is a type of love, a romantic love, the kinds of love that lovers are in, that's distinguished from friendship because lovers are always seen face to face. If you're in love, you know what that's like. You just stare at your beloved, lose track of time, right? Time stands still. You just stare in each other's eyes and ignore the rest of the world. Um, and lovers are always occupied with each other, and they're always occupied with their own relationship. Friendship doesn't work like that. Friends rarely will talk about their own relationship because they're too busy focusing on other things. And that's the mark of friendship, according to Lewis. And I think he's quite right about that. And I think he follows Aristotle on this, that the goal of friendship is not each other. If you and your buddies are sitting there playing Call of Duty or shooting hoops, or you're out, I don't know, surfing, or I don't know, driving off road or whatever, out on your quads or I don't know, dirt bikes or whatever, and you pull up to a stop, or one of you stops the game and looks at you and says, "We need to talk about us." You might think, well, I didn't know there wasn't us. I thought we were just playing COD, right? It's like, yeah, you should have a what we used to call a DTR. If that's the case, you need to define this relationship very quickly, in my opinion. So friends are not occupied with each other. They don't talk about the relationship. They don't focus on us. They're not absorbed with the relationship itself. Friends are seen not face to face like lovers, but side by side, like people in, say, a military marching army, or two people on a sports team who are working side by side, actively directed towards a goal. Friendship is teleological in nature. It's directed towards something else other than the relationship. It's directed towards an end of some kind. Now, the end of friendship can vary from person to person. I think ultimately there's an ultimate end of friendship, and this is where religious friendships, I think, can be the deepest kinds, because what you have is an end that's directed towards that which is eternal, towards God, to becoming more like Jesus, or to fulfill or expand God's kingdom. And that's where the deepest friendships, I think, will be about the deepest things. But friendships don't have to be about the deepest things to be friendships. But to be a friendship, they have to be about something else other than the relationship. So friendship comes about when there's two or more people. I think there's probably an upper limit on how many friends you can have simultaneously. I think Aristotle taught this too. I can't remember how many exactly. It's like 6 or 7 or something. But it may vary from person to person. But friendships are always directed towards something. Could be something trivial, like, I don't know, collecting stamps, or uh, you know, uh, knitting, scrapbooking. I don't know. Pick your favorite hobby. Restoring old cars, right? You could have friends that you're friends about something. If you don't have anything in common with someone, like nothing at all, what do you talk about when you hang out? What do you do together? It's really hard to be friends with people that are about which you have nothing in common. So the more commonality you have with someone, the more probable that it is, the more likely it is that you'll have a sustaining friendship with that person. This is where I think Aristotle, and people give him a hard time about this because he's very egalitarian. Is that the right word I'm looking for? Very specific that friendship can only be among equals. Like, it's really hard to be a friendship for someone if you're like middle class or whatever, and someone's super rich. How do you relate to that? They're like, hey, let's fly to Fiji for the weekend. You're like, dude, I barely put gas in my car. It's like, how do you can't do as much stuff with someone that's in a different like category than you are financially. It can happen, but it's harder. Or someone who's very old or very young. How do you be friends with if you're a middle aged dude, or you're like in your early 30s or even your mid 20s, hanging out with a middle schooler? It's like, well, if they're your kid or maybe a nephew you spend some time with or whatever, or you're part of a ministry or something, or volunteer to work with young kids, high school kids or whatever. But you're not at the same life stage. You don't have the same interests. You don't have the same concerns, and so it's very difficult, I think, to be friendship in that way. And this is where I think friendships between men and women are more difficult and probably should be rare at the depth that they could be. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think it's probably imprudent, and for men especially and women especially, as men and women, that the if Aristotle's right about the egalitarian nature of this, the equality part, that the best friendships, the most deepest friendships, the most lasting friendships will be between men and women and women. And I think when someone is married, uh, that is a normative requirement, I think, for Christians. You can argue about that if you want, but whatever. Um, so maybe the next question is, all right, I get that, Tim. It's like friendship is part of the descriptive and prescriptive psychology that comes to us from Plato. I get it, right? Okay. And then friendship is about something directed towards an object. But then the next is a very practical question: how do I get friends? Where do I get them? It reminds me of the old joke: the person wants to go to Miami and buy a business. One business, please. Uh, one friendship, please. I'd like to order a friendship. Does it show up on Amazon? I'd like to buy a friendship, please. Or maybe lease one with the option to buy. All right. Cracking myself up here. But no, a friendship takes time. It's not the kind of thing that's cultivated immediately. It is in a culture like ours where everything occurs immediately and instant, where you can literally almost buy anything that you want and have it show up at your doorstep within a day or a week. Um, we, I think, have lost this art of patience and steadfastness and stick-to-itiveness and time that is required to cultivate friendships. So here's how they start, in my view. And I say this could be wrong with this. I'm drawing from my own personal experience, but they start slowly, and they start with initial initiatives. And if you want a little philosophical discussion, the only one that I can think of is William James's The Will to Believe. He has this nice example of someone who's very standoffish and who won't initiate with someone and invite them to something, spend time with them in person, not online, in person, where you uh, get to know the person because you're doing the activities that you love and have in common. So, and this should be something that's offline. I highly suggest this offline, or maybe it involves something online, but is something that is done together in person. So if it's playing video games, you get together in person and play it, not just you sit at your house, I sit at my house. You have a LAN party or whatever. We used to do that with some buddies years ago. Um, you go to a car show. You have someone maybe someone from church, someone from work, someone a friend of a friend who's like super into cars. and you're like, yeah, man, let's go to this classic car show. Hey, I'm going. You want to come? I'm bringing a couple other buddies. Yeah, I'd love to have you join us. And you just call them up or text them and say, hey, we're going. Come with us. It'd be fun to have you. And sometimes in groups, you will find as you include someone in a group of friends you already have, or you initiate, but you have to do this. You have to initiate. You can't be shy about this. And if you're just cold and standoffish, like, I don't have any friends, uh, well, maybe it's because you're not initiating, right? So text someone, call them up. Hey, man, I'm going surfing tomorrow. I'm going to go to, go to Beacons at 10:30. You want to join me, right? Or you're like you're going to a church service. Like, hey man, I'm going tomorrow night to a men's breakfast. You want to come with us? Or hey, we're doing some volunteer work with Habitat for Humanity, or we're doing a cleanup day at the beach. Come with us, man. Then we're gonna go get some burritos afterwards. Or hey, you want to go to a baseball game or something? Whatever it is that you like to do, when you start inviting people to join you, then you have something to talk about. The next time you have something else to do together, and that builds on itself. And that's what creates friendship. And then slowly over time, you begin to build trust and you spend time together over those common activities, and friendships start to build. And so you have to be intentional. You have to be intentional, and you have to be willing to wait and take time with it too. Now, doing that doesn't ameliorate, doesn't make feelings of loneliness go away immediately. But what it does is it builds expectations of connecting with real people over their real lives over time, which removes that feeling of loneliness, in my experience. Now, maybe your experience is different. That's great. You can think about it on your own terms. But you have to initiate. You have to take the time to reach out to people and connect with them, and do it in person. Do it in person. And then the process can take years, and it may be extensive over the years. So the friendships that I have that have lasted, I'm thinking of a couple buddies that I'm going to be hanging out with up in the mountains in a few next month sometime. And there's four of us, and one of these buddies I've been friends with since middle school. We met in middle school, became closer friends in high school, college, even better friends, and then after that in adult life, sharing our lives together. So it's been like 40 some years almost. The other two are more recent friends. They've only known them for about 30 years. And then I have newer friends. One of them I'm gonna go surf with later this week. And I met him maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, right? So friendships, as one ages, maybe newer friends are rarer and rarer. But the younger you are, I think, the longer your friendships will last. I mean, it's kind of trivially true, right? But if you're older, it may be harder to initiate. But find the things you enjoy, and then invite people to join you in those things. And I think you'll find that friendships will build through them. And I think as a Christian, you should pray for your friends. And the more you pray for them, I think the more that God will unite your lives together in a way that makes loneliness much less of an issue. Um, Now, of course, look, friendships are temporal, right? Friends can move, they can leave, they can betray you, they can, do things that really bug you enough you don't want to spend time with them. They can die, right? And so, um, this is where the depth of friendship and the issue of loneliness brings another reality to it. Um, Jesus calls us friends, right? And in Him, you have a friendship that is everlasting and cannot be taken away from you. So God then is going to be, or ought to be, your ultimate friend, and Jesus calls us friends, and He wants to be that person that satisfies your loneliness, regardless of your station in life. And if you share that with other people, that are human friends in this life, that makes friendship much more robust and much more satisfying. So that's my prayer for you, is that God would be your ultimate friend, that you find a friend in Jesus. What a friend we have in Jesus. I think there's a song about that. But hopefully you found this little philosophical discussion of friendship helpful.